Well, welcome to another Friday where we chat to people in sports, business and entertainment and get behind their inspiring stories and what's made them great in sports and in life. Thanks to National Make Good Solutions, they're our proud sponsor. And don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Carey McKernan. You can see all the back episodes. We've interviewed Jason McCartney thus far. We interviewed the Shimba of the century, Glenn Archer. And Wayne Swass said to pass on, Duck, that it always seems like he's in front of you. So we interviewed Swatter last week, which was a lot of fun and very topical at the moment with Swatter and the space that he's in mental health. But I could go into a big, long welcome with Wayne Carey, but I think Sid Barker, MVP, Premiership captain, but most importantly, he's the Riverina captain of the century. Duck, how you going?
Yeah, very good, Corey. I think that's the best introduction I've ever had. And there seems to be a real North Melbourne theme about your interviews so far, but I know you know a lot of people, and it's I feel honoured to be amongst that list because there are some good men that you've already had a chat to.
Now, speaking of good men, there is, I don't want to gloss over it, there's a very good friend of ours, and I know we can send him a shout out that now Dean Collins has been a little bit ill lately, and I know that Colo's come good. I think we're nearly at the point now where we can have a bit of a joke about it, that they did a brain scan and they did actually find that he did have a brain. So just on that, we call Colo brains. Where did you started all this, where we started calling each other brains? Where did that come from?
It came from my dad. So when we were kids, we were always called dodos or brains, or it's not very complimentary. I'm not sure that it's the number one rule in parenting by saying your kid's got no brains or he's a dodo bird. But that's where it all started. And then, my eldest brother Dick would, call me brains, and anyone that made a mistake then for the rest of our, it was just something that bobbed up. And I think I started calling you brains, and then it got amongst our group. So I've got my dad, who, by the way, passed away last Saturday. I didn't have a close relationship with Dad in the last, so many years, but I have him to thank for those insults.
Yeah, it's quite funny how everyone it caught on like wildfire, especially at a place like North Melbourne, where we were very good at making a bit of one another. We were actually world class. And even when you think about it, that guys like Robert Scott and Johnny Blakey would actually come to North Melbourne and couldn't believe how much we used to take the mickey out of one another.
Yeah, I think that was, and to be honest, I think that was one of our strengths. I think, the fact that, and it's funny, my stepson Van now, and I've got little Carter, to be able to have banter, laugh at yourself, and I guess if you give it, you've got to be able to take it. Some of our ex-teammates weren't great at taking it, Corey, but very good at giving it. I'm sure he'll come up in conversation, or a couple of those guys will come up in the conversation that we have today. But I think I think that's what made us so close. That's one of the things that gelled the group together. Was that type of banter, was that closeness, and I think if you look, all around the world, and you'll probably bring him up, but I watched the Michael Jordan documentary during the week, and just to see someone like Michael having banter with people within the organisation, and you just thought, everyone does it, and I think it's really important, a really important part of the fabric of an organisation.
And I know, look, we are probably jumping ahead a little bit, but I know it was probably a strength of yours in terms of leadership. But that was also a part of what made North Melbourne great, is that whether it was you or anyone else, no one was put above anyone else as far as everyone was level. So to give everyone an idea, and the mickey we used to take out of one another at training, even you got arguably one of the greatest player of all time, even Duck could drop a mark at training and you'd walk up behind him and give him a tap on the bum and say, "It's all right, Duck, it'll come." But it just showed you, the amount where everyone was equal as far as when you came into the North Melbourne Footy Club. And I don't even know where that eventuated from. Do you reckon that was from you, or did it start with Scholl or Donald McDonald? Or
Yeah, look, when I and Corey, you got there obviously a few years after me. I'm a little bit older than you, but when I first got to the club, the captain was Matthew Larkin, and he was a great player, 3-time best and fairest winner. But you had Matty Larkin, Darren Steele, Peter German, Donald McDonald, even Lovey, and these guys. And it was sort of the old and the young. And Matty was more of an introvert than an extrovert, so he's pretty quiet. He just went about his business on the field. And then when Dennis got the coaching gig, and he decided to give me the captaincy, and let's be honest, there was probably 4 or 5 of us that could have easily been given the captaincy. But one of the things that I always thought, I didn't want to have separation of the old and the young or cliques. I always felt that you didn't quite belong when I first started, because they didn't really talk to you, and I didn't want that to be the case, when I got named captain. So, but it wasn't just me. I think like you said, we had a very good group that was really good at that. And you spoke to Schwatter, and it's quite unbelievable to think that he was going through what he was going through, but then when he was at the club, to act in a manner like you were talking about and be inclusive. And I'm sure there are days where he didn't want to be, over the top and really friendly to people and be, inviting and speaking to a young kid when they first get to the club. But he did that. And I think we had a good core of players that did that. So it certainly wasn't just me, but that was something that I was really strong about, making sure that, you weren't untouchable. Dennis was probably one that when, if there was a young kid or something come up and spoil the ball at training, he'd have a go at the kid for spoiling me, and I'd say, hang on, the kid's trying to make his way. He's allowed to spoil the ball. So, but yeah, that was just a part of, I think, a really close group that made us close off and on.
And you touched on that, like how did you in your own head work through that? You mentioned before you had Matthew Larkin, Peter German, and we'll get to Germo anyway, because Germo said that you should have been sacked from the footy club. But how did you, in your own mind, when you first were named captain, get over the fact of, and it's a great lesson for anyone that gets put in leadership at a young age, that all of a sudden you're leading older people. How did you work through that yourself, or who did you talk to?
Yeah, look, to start with, I just thought that the way I went about my training, which, I always love the element of, I love the training part. Some guys don't. Some guys have to work at that. I always love that. So I think that makes it easier. And then first and foremost, I just thought that if I continue the way I was, in terms of the way I played, and that was a start. I think all the other parts of the leadership come as you get older and you get better at it. I think to start with, even, if within a game, if I wasn't playing my best footy, you could become insular and be worried about yourself. Whereas the longer you were captain and the older and more experience you got, you learnt that even if you weren't playing well, you could still contribute, but you're worrying about other players. You're thinking outside yourself, and that didn't happen straight away. That's something that you, like I said, that you learn as you go.
And then was that one of the things at real early days? I know that one thing you mentioned, your training, and I always mention to you the thing that people don't understand was how great a trainer you were. One of the things that I know Dennis said to you when you became captain, which was also funny because it was also a part of your DNA makeup, that you could go back to Wagga and prepare and do your own hard training. But even Dennis said, hey, son, if you want to be captain, you're not going back to Wagga anymore pre-Christmas.
Yeah, that was tough. And that's why when Dennis first called me and said, I want you to be captain, I said, well, what does that mean? That was my first question. What does that mean? What do I have to do? And he said, well, for starters, son, you won't be going home to Wagga. and you won't be spending, Chris, or have a longer break. Shimmer used to let me have that little bit longer break. He said that won't be happening because we need the captain at the club setting the example. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to be captain. Um, and then after obviously hanging up, and this is before mobile phones, remember? So he's rang me on the house phone, and I hung up, had to think about it for a couple of days, and thought, oh, what an honour, what a privilege. And I simplified it. I simplified it in my own head and just thought, well, if I go about what I know I can do and what I can do well, and what I can control, then hopefully everything else looks after itself. I think I was very fortunate too, Corey, that we had a good core group. We're on the improve. Then the likes of yourself and Archer came, a year later. So all of a sudden, we've got a really good young group of players, and invariably, when Dennis took over, we started winning, and we won more than we lost. Everyone thinks that's not just me. That's the group, and because we started winning from the very, very beginning, I mean, my job as captain, I think, was a really easy one. In actual fact, from 93 right through until 2000, we never missed the finals.
No.
So, it was a dream run. I guess if you want to be captain of an organisation, that was the prime time to be named captain, and you could say I was lucky.
But yeah, look, I think the thing that probably gets understated, and especially like someone like yourself, the impact I would say that you had on the group in terms of the way your preparation can't be understated. And I always say, even the example from another club, like the example of Chris Judd going to Carlton, or maybe even the effect that even of Ben Cousins when he went to Richmond, yeah, he had his off-field dramas, but they see the way that you prepare. There's the stuff that you do in training, and you do what everyone else does, or what we do, like as in the extras. And I know Dennis said the bike riding, the swims and everything like that we used to do. But I still remember, I don't know whether you remember this, I think I've told you this story. One pre-season training, I was in your group. You kept on running on the inside lane like you always did. And then even little thing, you talk about a mindset thing where you went, okay, that if you want it, you beat me. You know what I mean? So, but it was all these things added up. I don't think it can be understated in terms of, yeah, we had a lot of talent, but having either guys like yourself and then Johnny Blakey and people like that, when you're seeing these role model people, the way they go about it, in the end, it was a case of monkey see, monkey do type thing.
Yeah, and once again, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you had Blake's, Steve-O. I mean, we had a number of guys that really loved training. You loved training. Your enthusiasm when you came to training was second to none. You used to bounce around after a game like a spring chicken, and sometimes I used to think, how do you do it? But and that lifts people around you. I guess that for me, that just came naturally, natural in the way I just went about when I was in a group. And some may say some of my influences, in terms of, I guess I always wanted to make, and I think one of the things about leadership, and one of the most important things I think about leadership for me, and there's so many different ways you can lead, but for me, leadership is about making people around you better. And if you can make people around you better, then I think you've done your job. Now, clearly there are leaders that can make themselves better, and that's, I guess but I think to go outside yourself and make people around you better while you lead is the key to leadership. Because what you have to remember about our sport is it's a team sport. One individual can't win a game of footy for you. They can have a big influence, but they can't. You need your teammates. You need to make your teammates better. And I think that was one of the things that I tried to do. And I think we all, once again, I'll bring it back to not just me. I think there was, the John Blakeys, the Steve-Os, and even Arch, who I know you've spoken to on this podcast as well. Even Arch, I mean, when he first started playing footy, not a good trainer at all. And by, I don't know when the penny dropped for him, but he became one of the best trainers, and trained as hard as anyone, and probably had to train as hard as anyone. So, it's amazing how, when you do see people doing those types of things, how it can make you follow.
Do you think, even when you break it down like that, in essence, your leadership model was very natural to your actual personality and the way you went about it? If you're already making people, wanting them to make them feel better. And then I know, even talking to David King, I think one of the biggest compliments that he could actually give you, and I know I can say this even with my friends and mates as well, is that the way that you treated others and people that would come down, and that also extended to the trainers and all the staff around the footy club, the way that they were made to feel welcome. So in the end, it wasn't as if it was manufactured the way that you were going to go about from your own personal leadership model, was it?
No, and I think that's why it's so important when, and I've had people come up to me and talk about leadership and, how I went about it. And for me, that was natural. It wasn't manufactured at all. It's just how I went about it. And the conversations I've had with people that have spoken to me about my style, I've said, don't even worry about how I went. You've got to have your own style. You can't manufacture it, or certainly you can work on things that you think you might need to work on. But I think, for instance, if you are an introvert, then don't try to be an extrovert just for the sake of being an extrovert because you think that's better on the group. You've got to be yourself. And I think if you be yourself, then it's more authentic, and people see that, and then they will follow. And I think, that's, and I'll keep bringing it back to, this wasn't just me. We just had a ripping group that invariably, because of the closeness that we had, we just became, inseparable. We did everything together, and lunches during the week, and even time when we were away from the club, we still got together. In the summer, we're all hung out in our time off. It was unique, and I know, speaking to one of our great rivals just up the road with Essendon, they saw how we were, and one of the things that they discussed as a group was we've got to, and they actually said we've got to try to be like North Melbourne. We've got to get that closeness and that real care for one another that we know that this group's got. So it was interesting for them to admit that they actually did that.
Was it also interesting, and that was actually on the tip of my tongue, that actual next question, but that's also interesting because when you have the guys that came and probably asked you the question, like a James Hird and Matthew Lloyd, they've got a vastly different makeup to Wayne Carey. So they obviously had to find their own version, whether that was getting a Dean Solomon or someone that's more socially inclined, because those guys, again, that's probably not in their natural makeup.
No, exactly. And look, I am old school, let's be honest. I'm probably from the Steve Kernahan mould of Jonathan leadership. Yeah. So I used to categorise it as the sort of straighty 180s, and then you had the lads, and I was certainly a lad, and so I was a leader in that respect. And I always felt that it would be easier to be a lad and a leader than a straighty 180 and be a leader, because the lads, well, we know what lads are like. So, the lads probably don't fall into line with the straighty 180s, whereas the straighty 180s will fall into any line. And that's why I felt that it was, I guess, and once again, that wasn't manufactured, as you well know, but, a lot of people would see that. I would argue that what we did off the ground and the closeness that we had off the ground, and we liked a good time, I think that paid dividends on the ground. But some would say that, I guess in today's view of true leadership, it probably wouldn't be tolerated now.
would that also be one of your greatest legacies, or something now that you actually look back with a lot of pride? I know you mentioned it, but it was unusual that if you didn't go on the footy trip at North Melbourne.
Very, very, and frowned upon. And yeah, you're right. I mean, to have a squad of 40 or 42 or whatever it was at that time, and only have a couple here and there every year not go. And by the way, some of it was a battle, as you know, Corey, to get some guys to go, but in sort of sometimes harsh words, letting some guys know that they're never going to get an opportunity maybe to go overseas and be looked after, and you know, and really get to know their teammates on a different level, whole different level. I thought it was paramount, and I thought it was, you know, once again, we were the envy of all the clubs, and we used to run into other teams when we're in certain parts of the world, and they'd have 15 blokes, and they'd roll up to the swimming pool, and we'd have 40 blokes. So it would be fair to say that we dominated the pool, because 40's good. And they would go, how'd you get 40 blokes? You know, we've only got 15. And it really did become a focus for teams back then to try and emulate once again what we'd created, which was something really special.
Now, it's quite interesting. I've been watching Narcos Mexico lately, and I saw how they meddled in an election. Now, I think it was a very similar voting process as what used to happen at the North Melbourne City Club. We'd have a voting process, and it could be 36-4 in favour of going to Bali, or Vegas, and Duck would just say, right, we're all going to Vegas.
Yeah, well, Corey, as I guess, as our profiles grew, and I'm going to sound like a real flog here, but as our profiles grew, I felt that you know, going to Tassie and Adelaide and Queensland and Bali, which is, you know, basically Australia, I felt we needed to get to places where we could all be, you know, we could all fly under the radar. And so, yeah, when those votes came in, it was quickly corrected. But in saying that, a lot of that was based around whether players could afford to go overseas, and things like that. And, you know, we always let them know, and whoever was on the committee, and I'm sure that changed, but we'd always let them know that, don't worry, you're going to be all right, and you're going to have the trip of your lifetime. You can go to Bali, you know, or Tassie or Adelaide, you know, a million times in your life. You're not going to be able to go to, you know, Cancun or Cabo San Lucas or I think we went to Ireland. I mean, you know, Boracay. You know, we went to Vietnam before Vietnam was trendy. So we went to all of these places, you know, way before anyone even really, you know, before they became commercialized. So, you know, talk about being, you know, flying under the radar. No one knew who any of us were, and we could just go there and just completely be encapsulated in one another and have a ripping time.
It does show you how gullible you can be on your first footy trip. I remember one night we'd had maybe way too many beers in Bali, and I had to walk you back to your room. So when you're a young kid, you think, oh, geez, great, I'm walking Wayne Carey back to his room. And then you proceeded to tell me, and it shows you how gullible young players are, that I think at that time Mariah Carey was really big. And you proceeded to tell me, you go, and you know who my cousin is, don't you? And you go, Mariah. So I've dropped you off at your room. And then thought, that's famous. His cousin's Mariah Carey.
Oh, of course. You were gullible. Look, and you know, I would have liked Mariah's music. That's one of the things that I know, found very amusing about my music taste.
Yeah.
And I would have had Mariah. I had all sorts of. I was very broad. Let's put it that way. I loved I love rom-coms. I love all the love songs.
Because what was it? Was it what was it? Was it 902?
Uptown? I love Uptown Girl by Billy Joel, and you know, all of these. George Michael, Faith.
Well, if everyone out there remembers a series during the 90s called Melrose Place,
Yes.
now you go around the Duck's house and him and Brad Scholl and a great mate of ours, Judah, they were all characters in Melrose Place.
Everyone wanted to be Jake, and Sholly always thought he was Blake. You had Judah was Matt.
Don't say what Judah was.
He was Matt, the doctor, and I was Billy because I had sort of curly hair. So, just goes to show you small things amuse small minds.
Now, what was the other thing? Now, I don't know whether you can see a picture that's come up on the screen that everyone's going to be able to see. This, I'll let you tell the story if you can remember this in detail, because you remember I'll only put in one point to this. Where we were training had that really long driveway that had the speed humps. So when you see the red Porsche coming in, I'll let you take off with the rest.
I reckon is that St Bernard's?
No, that's out near the zoo. Remember where we used to train?
Oh, yes.
That big long driveway.
Well, well, clearly you can see there. So who's that? Is that Swatter? That's Mick, obviously.
You got
sorry, Sholly and Horse, Johnny Longmire. Now, just for everyone, that's not my car. It looks like I'm getting out of that car, but that's Mick Martin's Porsche. And what's funny about that is Mick's 6'4", 110 kilos, and had back problems. And he's driving around, squishing himself into that Porsche. And as you said, going over those humps, the Porsche was scraping along over every speed hump. But like Mick was a fullback and driving around. And when he rolled up in that, I don't know whether you remember, Corey, but look at us. Look at Horse. You can see Horse just laughing his head off there at Mick.
Well, to put it into context, Doug, you imagine at North Melbourne, well, I'll let everyone know this, right? Even the great Wayne Carey, even when the blue and white boots came out with Nike, you'd be scared to wear different things to actual footy training in case you incurred the wrath of Dennis Pagan that you weren't, like 96 grand final, we weren't allowed to wear sunglasses in the parade. Like even little things like that, we couldn't wear them. So this is actually putting it into context. When you got the great Michael Bernard Martin, by the way, rocks up to training, we had no idea who was going to get out of the car. And then you got Mick get out of the car. I reckon that car lasted 2 weeks, didn't it, Duck?
Yeah, it didn't. It didn't last long. But you're right. You're exactly right. I mean, Dennis didn't like anything flashy. If someone decided to have a bit of a flash haircut, you soon got snapped into line. So, he was straight. So rolling up in a Porsche was certainly a no-go. And I remember there was talk that we might have got. There were conversations that the great Dermot Brereton was going to be involved with the footy club, and I thought, wow, imagine Dermy at North. It just would not have worked.
Now the other one that's in that photo, by the way, and he's now the Sydney. I know I've totally glossed over the whole Carey Longmire story. That's probably for another time. But Horse, remember, did actually get a Harley, and that only lasted.
Yes.
Either.
Yeah, and well, Horse. What people tend to forget is Horse was the guy. I mean, he was an unbelievable player, as you know, Cause, and before he, certainly before he had his knee issues, but to nearly kick 100 goals at the age that he was, and he was an incredible player and become an unbelievably good coach as well. Who would have thought? But yeah, he's probably got a bit ahead of himself, and thought that I'll sort of get the Harley, and that did not go down well with Dennis, as you mentioned. And he's a guy that, and I guess this is why he's become a very good coach. Horse had a very good sense of humour, but he always had a very serious side, and always a very honest guy. So. Although I never thought he'd be one that went into coaching, I did do a little bit of travelling with Horse overseas. So I know him quite. I know I know him quite well, and he did have always a serious side, but he was a sensational player, Johnny Longmire.
Was that the same trip that you, Horse, and Matty Caps, and then did you go to Madame Tussauds at all?
Madame Tussauds, yeah.
Who did you have a photo next to?
David Hasselhoff. I thought everyone used to say that I looked a bit like the Hoff.
No, it's just you. It's just you. It was just you that said that.
No, people said I looked like the Hoff when I had curly hair. And so I got a photo with him. And I'm not sure who Horse and Matty Cap got a photo with. That was an interest. Once again, without trips like that, of course, you know your teammates and you hang out with them, and go out when you're back home. But when you go on an actual, a long trip around the world with these guys, you really get to know. You get to know the little things that they do that would annoy their partners, and their strengths and their loves, and that's where you really get to know people.
Well, that, to give everyone an idea, I'm pretty sure. Well, that was either Matty Capuano's first.
It was overseas trip
at North Melbourne. To give everyone an idea, again, if anyone wanted to go, they could go. But Matty Caps' end of his first footy season went away with John Longmire and Wayne Carey. How's that for a baptism by fire?
and he had a ball, actually. He had better form than Horse.
That's not hard.
It'd be fair to say, though, Corey, with those two and me, there were many a night where they'd locked themselves. They were up in bed watching Milo and Otis. And I said, I'm just going to go out for a little bit longer, and I'll see you boys. I'll see you boys in the morning.
Well, I think it's a couple of Group 2 country racing trying to keep up with a Group 1 Melbourne Cup winner.
Yeah, well, yeah, there were a few occasions where I tucked them into bed and had to head out for a bit longer.
And Duck, I know that you love your boxing, but it seemed like the Djakovic and Carey duels took on a Fraser and Ali type vibe. And even for me that was playing in those games, it seemed like it took on a personality bigger than the game. Did it actually feel like that playing within the games themselves?
Yeah, look, there was always a big build-up to it, as you know. You lived it. And it was, in a way, it was a little bit embarrassing because, it's just two people on opposing teams. A battle within a battle, I suppose. Yeah. But the one thing people don't realise is when I beat Jacko, we lost. And when he beat me, we won. So the actual battle itself never had a bearing actually on the result. And I know that there's probably one or two here and there where it was the other way. But, yeah, it was very interesting. And look, Jacko and I have become, I guess, mates after footy, spent a bit of time together. And not that I've looked into it too much, Corey, but he played 276 games. I played 272. We both won 4 best and fairests.
He was only off the top of your head type.
He was only a 2-time All-Australian. I was 7. Both 2-time premiership players, although I was captain. So I think I won 2 MVPs, 6-time runner-up. He never won any of those. I haven't thought about it much at all.
No, I can tell. So you played each other. You played each other 18 times, but that's what apparently what the record say. So what do you have the ledger in those 18?
Isn't that weird to think 18? And I wore number 18, and my email account has 27 in it because that's my birthday and that's Jacko's number. I remember when I first had to give Jacko my email, he thought I had 27 out of honour for him. I had to explain to him that it's my birthday, and that's why the 27's there. Nothing to do with him. No, look, Jacko gets understated as a player, I think. I mean, he's a guy that won 4 best and fairest in an era where you had Matera, and absolute superstars in their team, and he was their pillar. He was unbelievably strong, but what people don't realise, he did have a really good tank. wasn't overly quick, but was quick enough. But his great strength was he could spoil you, but he could also accumulate possessions. He got the ball, so he could hurt you the other way. He was good on his left foot. He was good on his right foot. He was just sound. He was very sound, very solid. And, you know, he certainly the way West Coast set up and the way we played into the Glenn Jakovic, and people used to think that I got caught up in wrestles with him, and probably was the case on some occasions. But the way we played, where we were a pretty long, direct kicking team. Well, you know, when you're playing against a team like West Coast, who, by the way, had some handy players around him as well. I mean, they were a great defensive unit. Yeah, they were a great unit. Jack led very, very well by, I think, the best defender of that time in Glenn Jakovic. And some other forwards didn't find Jacko as tough as what I did, but maybe it was the style that, you know, we played suited him a little bit. But he's a star. He was a star. No doubt about it.
Would you do anything different from a preparation point of view going into any of those games, or was it an extra edge that you try and think of? Hang on, I know I've got Jacko this week. Knowing that, knowing you knew what the tally was in your head, and you knew you had to get one back.
Dennis always felt that he thought going into the games that I had to show Jacko that I was stronger than him, which I found amusing because if you've ever stood next to Glenn Jakovic, and by the way, he didn't mind putting a little bit of oil on, he was oiled up. Greenpeace would have a field day with Jacko if he went in the water with the amount of oil that he put on his arms and legs. But he was a man mountain, and you know his agility and you know his sideways movement was superb. He had a great step on him, and like I said, wasn't super quick in a straight line, but did enough. But he was he was a great player. And as our careers went on, we actually hated one another at the start. And as the years went on, we just had an enormous respect for one another. And as I said, now we've had a lot of good times actually after footy, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, because you're probably doing some cashies together and doing a few sports.
Well, Jacko and we laugh about this because everyone knows that, you know, after a game, I never ever had any alcohol, or, you know, we spoke about training. I mean, I never had a sip of alcohol during the week, during my whole footy career. But after a game, I felt that you deserved a beer. So I'd go and have a few beers, obviously, we all would. And if it was a Friday night, you could have a couple more on a Saturday. But once the weekend was over, it was training time. I didn't know this, but I didn't know that Jacko never had a drink during his whole career after a game. So talk about chalk and cheese.
Yeah, I know.
And I actually say, Jacko, imagine how good I would have been if I hadn't have had a drink. In actual fact, it would have been the opposite. I felt for me, and other players that were a similar vein during their careers and liked a beer after a game, it was just your time to release and yourself. So when you're having I always felt with, having a beer with you, Corey, or Arch, or any guys after a game, if you played well, you got brought back to earth. It was like, pull your head in, whatever, very quickly. And if you played poorly, you got picked up. And you got, don't worry, it's one bad game. You'll be right. Train hard during the week, and things will turn around. So, it was leading teams. They talk about leading teams. You were being self-assessed straight after the game by your teammates.
Yeah.
So it was, it worked for me, and it doesn't work for everyone.
I know, but so what's the definitive? If you had 18 times, what's the tally? Who's?
What do you say?
What does he say?
Well, he says he won, and I'm happy. I'm happy for him to say that he won more battles, but I'll say that it's easier to punch it than it is to mark it.
Well, I might be able to answer that. We're getting on to now. We are getting on to the top 5 games ever from Wayne Carey, and a part of that might answer. There is one of the games from the West Coast Eagles in here. So just take us into how, when I say we, but how you come up with rating your games of footy. Yeah. And I know that there is a benchmark that you always say in your head about the possessions and the goals, and just take everyone into your mindset into how you came up with this.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, the one thing that I never did, and I was always honest with you know, I think I was always honest with myself when it came to how I played. And I certainly didn't evaluate it by goals. Goals was never a part of my valuation when I valued my game. Yeah. There were games where I kicked 7 goals and only had probably 12 kicks. I didn't rate that as a great game. You know, if you kick 7 and if you didn't hand you know, 4 or 5 off, but you just kick 7 yourself. And I know everyone's different, and I guess if you're a full forward, then your mindset's probably different. Yeah. But for me, I got more value out of, and I also rated it on the opponent that you're against. Yeah. So you know, there's games where I kick, you know, bags of goals, but we won the game by 90 points or 100 points, and the team we were playing, obviously at that time were poor. So how do you value that? So for me, it was about when I looked at this, it was about who I was playing on, the team that they were, I guess the rivalry, in some cases the pressure, whether it be a final, obviously more pressure. Might have been, you know, if you weren't feeling 100% and you went into a game, you know, well underdone, and you performed really well, I rate that higher than when you go in feeling great and, you know, and play well. So all of those different components for me, looking at your best performances come into action. But I'm not just saying this. I got more satisfaction out of setting a goal up than I did kicking it. So therefore, I got more upset when I set you up, or I set Fruity up, or I set Winnie up, or Horse, or anyone. If I kicked the ball to you and you missed, I got more upset with that than if I missed a goal myself. Yeah. Because I just love giving the ball to other people to kick the goal themselves.
Now, we are going to go into the 5 best Wayne Carey games of all time. But before we do that, I might put Ange under a little bit of pressure, our my producer. He has what we think is your greatest mark of all time. And quite funnily enough, it's not on an opponent from another team. It makes it even better that it's on Nick Martin. Now, Ange, I'll put you under pressure at all. He's just going to throw it up on the screen. Have a look at that for a thing of beauty.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I know that you found this somewhere, and I'm glad you found it, because that without a doubt is the best mark I ever took in terms of, I get just a really clean jump. And the one thing about the great Mick Martin, and the fact that it's on Mick as well, just makes it even more special. That was obviously an intra-club game in Rosebud. And it was the start of obviously a year where we're starting to, we're probably only 3 or 4 weeks out from playing. And I hadn't had a kick. Mick, you know, going into these types of games, I guess you're not really, really focused on, necessarily playing well, but you're just trying to get match fitness. But the thing about Mick, and Mick had a lot of great marks taken on him because, and the reason for that, I'll give him, Mick's the strongest man I believe ever to play AFL footy. He benched over 200 kilos. I'm not sure anyone else has ever done that, but just his strength to be able to hold up nearly 100 kilo guy, and look, he stands up in it, as you can see in that photo, and he doesn't crumble underneath you, so he makes it easy to sit on. But yeah, that brings back good memories, and I do remember that, even though I didn't have too many kicks in this intra-club game, that was in all the papers, and that Mick wasn't happy about that.
I know that he didn't hear the end of it. That you're right. From memory, you actually didn't get many kicks. You'd be lucky if that was your only kick of the game, and that was front and centre. I think we found that was on the front page of The Age the following day.
He wasn't happy, but I mean, just for a pure sit on someone, that's probably And some of those opportunities, although Jeremy Howe and, I guess Flying Ryan and a few of those guys will disagree with me because they do it nearly every week. But a sit like that sometimes only comes along once in a football career. And it so happened it was on our good mate Mick. So I'm thankful for that, although he brings up that I'm wearing a yellow Guernsey. And he calls it a seconds Guernsey. And I should remind Mick that I was actually captain of the club. So maybe the North Melbourne Guernsey might have been the seconds Guernsey that day.
Yeah. Well, either way, it's a fairly decent hang. But we'll rip into the games.
Yep.
So, number five that we had in there, and this will probably make it pretty sweet after what we were just talking about before with Djakovic. West Coast 1993, 21 touches, 15 marks, 5 goals, and that would have been playing on Djakovic. And quite funnily enough, to actually refute what you said before, we actually won that game in Perth.
Oh, right. Did we?
We did.
I think that was
You kicked 5 goals and you kicked 5 goals.
Yeah, that was, and from memory, Corey, and the only reason why I do remember, because I did say, Jacko and I, and Jacko has a real good memory. I think that was the first time we ever played on one another. And from memory, from what Jacko said after the game, Mick Malthouse pulled Jacko into the locker, sat down and said, hey son, it's a bit like Dennis. Hey son, you know what? You better work out, what you did right and wrong today, because you're going to be playing on that bloke for the next 10 years. So, there's your challenge. And, he clearly did a bit of work because he got me on a fair few occasions. So, yeah, it was, and I rate that purely because that was the start of us becoming a really good team course. And West Coast coming off a premiership and winning in Perth. So in Perth against a young champion in Djakovic and against the reigning premier, I rate that right up there as obviously one of the better performances that I had in my career and early in my captaincy.
Yeah. The next one, number 4, and again, there's a couple of games in here, and I must take it, and I'll let you explain this. So this was the 1999 Port Adelaide final at the MCG, having 24 possessions in the wet, 11 marks, 18 of those were contested. Now, just give everyone an insight out there about your childlike, the way that you used to go about wet weather footy, and when we go to training and say, right, it's a great night for sliders.
Yeah, well, people used to say, if it was raining in a particular game, and I loved playing in the wet. And Dennis sort of worked that out way back in the under-19s, because I played obviously my first year at North in the under-19s under Dennis, and it was raining one day, and I took a heap of marks, and I think he was very shocked, because being a key position player, it's not normally it's not the norm. But as a kid, my eldest brother Dick, used to, when it used to pour, and when I say pour, I mean thunderstorms, rain, lightning, everything. And remember the ovals, you just go to a local oval and it'd be just covered in water, and we'd go down there and just kick the ball in the air and run and dive and slide for metres in the wet, and he'd kick balls at me, and I'd pick them up and and then kick it over my head, so you run back with the flight and mark it on your chest and slide. It was just good fun. But invariably
is that where the whole running back with the flight of it actually came from? Was doing that with Dick, or was that just the mindset thing? I was just going to come in.
No, the running back with the flight of the ball is not. It's got nothing to do with courage or anything like that. It's what it is. It's pulling out of the lead at the right time to get back to where the ball's going. So some players will just continue to lead up, and also then turn around and sort of go back. Whereas I was always watching the kicker, so I'm reading the body language of the kicker. So if I could see that the kicker was going to kick it to me, and by his body language, his eyes, everything, I'd lead, and as soon as I thought, no, he's not going, I'd pull out of the lead and wheel and turn back, and invariably get back to where the ball was going. Therefore, you could run back with the flight of the ball.
There is a very famous one, if you remember from that game, Matty Capuano he was on 50 metres, and that illustrates your point to a T that you initially, he ignored you, and even the commentators basically said, oh, why is he ignoring you? You go out a shot, and then you run back with the flight of it and take running back with the flight mark in the goal square.
Yeah, and actually I do remember that vividly, obviously, because doing this exercise, I thought about the games, and I was absolutely clear. I mean, Matty, Cap, let's be honest though, ruckman, they're not designed to think on their feet necessarily. Oh, you're a different ruckman. I exclude you from that conversation. I always do when I talk about ruckman. You're a very different type, along with Jimmy Steins, different type, but different to you. Matty Cap, obviously, if he didn't see me, he's blind. But once again, I could tell by his body language, and I let him know by my body language that I wasn't happy while I was turning around to go back. By my body language, that he should have kicked it in shorter, but because I read it quick enough, I was able to get back to where the ball was going and invariably mark it. So that's what that skill set is. And I've spoken to forwards over the last decade or so, even in the modern game, and talked to them about being able to read those types of situations to get back. And if you don't get back to take the mark, Corey, what can you be? You can be front and square.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're able to still be involved in the game, even if it's not a marking contest.
Yeah. And get on to number 3, the 94 Hawthorn drawn final. Now, I had to do a double take on this that even I find pretty impressive, and I don't usually impress that easily. Playing centre-half forward and having 32 possessions, 10 marks and 4 goals is, nearly a normal day. At 32 possessions playing centre-half forward, that's pretty good going.
Yeah, I think, and that was a big moment for us because that was our first finals win. And little did we know that it would send us straight into a prelim. We got the week off.
Lucky for you.
Hey, yeah. Well, I went into the game under an injury cloud as well, which is why I rated that game highly. Not the 32 possessions, but because I was under an injury cloud, hadn't trained much, and a final.
Can you, just explain to everyone the injury that you had, because it was a pretty weird injury. It was a soleus, if my memory serves me correct. The funny thing with the soleus is that you can, when you jog, it hurts, but when you run flat out, it doesn't.
Yeah, well, the main calf takes over. The main muscle in the calf takes over when you sprint, but when you're just walking or jogging, the soleus. So, in ideal circumstances, you would have missed games, but and if I remember, and I had a couple of those injuries over my career, and they're sore, and I guess it's just a good indicator. Don't jog around or don't walk, sprint. But yeah, that game has really fond memories. Obviously, the first draw that goes into extra time.
Yeah.
And then to have our first finals win was pretty special. And from all, and we from memory, we flogged Hawthorn that year in the home and away. We had a massive win against them.
25 points, I think.
Yeah. So, what an effort it was by them. And they had, obviously the likes of Darren Jarman and Platt and Dunstall. So, they were an awesome opponent. So to beat them in a final, having so much respect for that footy club, once again, a bit like West Coast, they'd won, premierships of recent time as well. So, to win that one was really, really fond memories.
Yeah. And the other one that comes out of that, if David King had gone back and maybe kicked the ball a little bit quicker, because he had Longmire, Carey, McKernan all in the goal square, we mightn't have gone to extra time. Exactly right. And I was fairly
once again, with body language, letting Kingy know that he should have got back a bit quicker. But it all turned out in the end. Obviously we got up in extra time, but it really does bring back happy memories, doesn't it? I started in 1989, and then that was my first finals win in 1994. So yeah, it was really happy.
Yeah. And the next one, this one's probably nearly one of my bigger favourites because there is a little bit of a backstory to it. The 1997 final against Geelong, where you kicked 7 out of the 11 goals, had 23 possessions, 10 marks. And for people that actually saw that game, it was as wet as anything. But I think what I do remember about that week is that Ben Graham did actually say he might have had your measure a little bit during the week. And there's not many times, I used to be able to tell with your preparation that when you're on song, but I could tell you when you're a little bit more business-like than usual. And on this occasion, it was a case of, Benny, you poked the bear, mate, you're going to pay for it.
Look, and the reason why I rate this game so highly because 97, we won the premiership in 96, obviously. First round in 97, I dislocate my shoulder. I have a shoulder reconstruction. I got back in 10 weeks to play the second part of the season. But I played that half a season at centre half back. Yeah. Not at centre half forward. And come closer to the finals, and in the finals, Dennis said, "Well, we're going to put you back to centre half forward." And but in all honesty, I had one arm. When you say I took 10 marks, I'm not sure how. I'd love to sit down and watch the whole thing because I obviously can't remember. I remember obviously kicking 7 goals, but to take 10 marks in the wet, and like I said, and seriously had one arm. I couldn't lift one arm above shoulder height. That's why I rate the game so highly, and in the wet as well. But once again, we touched on that the fact that I love the wet. So yeah, it was that game arguably, could have been my best, just because of the circumstances. A final, injured, and on the captain of Geelong, who, by the way, I don't think I'd ever played on really before. I think he might have knew that I wasn't 100% fit, and I guess it was a good lesson for players not to sort of make those sort of comments before you play a game.
Yeah, it probably wasn't the wisest move. Which now leads me onto our number one game. Now, there was a lot of games obviously we could choose from. Special mention games, I think there was the 93 Essendon Friday night. There was some Hawks games in there. There was even a 94 Western Bulldogs game out at Whitten Oval. So, yeah, there are a lot of games that we can choose from, but we've nailed it down to this one. I think from a complete game as far as marking and your follow-up and I suppose all the other factors added in of the Bombers where you were dealing with Barnard, Solomon and Barry Young. They basically made it known, I think, that they were going to go after you. So we're just going to throw to the footage now. I think it's about 6 or 7 minutes in. I've already fed you a goal, by the way, so I've got a good start.
Yeah, look, the thing about when we had Bombers games, causes, as you know, we always got up for them. We had a great rivalry. They were a really good team at this point. So were we. They sent Barnard. I found out this afterwards, but Kevin Sheedy made a point that he wanted their back line to target me and be really physical with me, which, I don't think they'd sort of done before. So they wanted to see whether that would work, I guess. But Barnard was my first opponent on that day. There's a bit of push and shove, but I always felt when teams tried to be like that, I just think it sharpens your focus. It sort of makes you, I guess, even more determined in some ways. So, there are I always felt that if someone did that to me, I certainly made me maybe go a little bit harder. But they were just such a good team and such a great rival that it was always good to, you know. And I know I think I kicked 10 goals in that game, but I had influences in other ways that I rate really highly. I think there was a massive crowd there that day. I think it was a Saturday afternoon.
68,000, I think.
Yeah, 68,000, you know. So, really, really good, big game. Obviously the G, as I said, and I think that was the best individual performance that I sort of gave. In saying that, it wasn't a final. I felt pretty good going into it. But I fond memories, although we did lose the game. And I do remember Lloydie kicking 7 at the other end. And he was pretty special as well. And Corey, you were good that day. It was just you know what it was? It was just a great game. Even though we got beaten.
Like, especially like when you look back at this footage, as you said, it ended up being a pretty high scoring game. Like, do you think, especially with the way that was the game played, where you're being most of the time isolated, one out, like could you sense if you're on someone and you felt like you're on, invariably, you know, I mean, a lot of the time anyway, you tell me to get the hell out of the way, but if you knew that you really had someone, was that something in your head where you just go, I want as much room so I can go to work here?
Yeah, I mean, one of our if you want to call it tactics calls, as you know, was to, and I think one of the things that you try to do to a defence, and that is you want to isolate defenders. You don't want them to be able to support one another. And even in the modern game, you see, you know, players, you know, guarding space, so to speak, and being able to get over, be that third man up to spoil. And, you know, no different to when, you know, if you had an opponent that I felt that, you know, you could certainly manipulate and be stronger than, then, you know, it was my job to give you that room to do this, you know, to do the same thing. And I think that's what, you know, what we talked about earlier today, and that is understanding and making players around you better, and understanding when they're on, you give them, you know, their space, and try to draw players out of you know, the space that they want to go into. And yeah, it was you know, that was always, wasn't just you know, I know it might have seemed that way sometimes, of course, but isolate me and my man. But clearly the opposition always knew that we were trying to isolate yourself or me or Horse. So the opposition knew what we were trying to do, but at time, you know, that can be difficult to stop.
And there was this boomer on the screen there. He played 58 games there. He went on to play another 400 after that. So, but I think it was interesting. Solomon basically, even though Boom ended up with that free kick, then I think you could tell the way that they tried to tackle you and hit you, and then it's just bubbling along nicely. All this this little bit of angst that in the end it kicks off very shortly.
Well, and that's the thing about when a coach asks you to go out and do something that is manufactured and doesn't come natural, then your focus can go off what you're there to do, and that is to win the footy, beat your opponent. But if they clearly went out there with a focus to upset me, then that was always going to give my teammates other opportunities, because they would have a focus on me at particular times, and a couple of occasions that's how it turned out. But I will say, Sheed's certainly the guys that Sheed spoke to about doing it. It was in their nature. Let's be honest. They
Barnard, Solomon, and Barry Young all back there, and quite the funny. You know, this day when I actually had a look at this, you had Barnard, Solomon, and Barry Young back there,
and Hardwick.
We had Dimmer, but then the funny thing was, the other one who was probably the maddest of the lot was Dean Wallace. He was playing forward. There he is.
Yeah, he did end up playing on me for a little bit that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, he didn't start there. I never played a lot on Spotty Dean.
Yeah.
Got to know him after footy. Really nice guy, actually. But you know, he's actually a guy that had fair bit of talent, but had a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they, like I said, there were a lot of similarities about that Bombers team and our great teams. Had a little bit of mongrel, and they had some real class in, obviously, you know, Lloyd and Bird and these guys. So you know, once again, really good memories and games that you really wanted to be a part of.
Just giving him a nice bit of honest feedback there.
Yeah.
I think she's about to kick off any second. I think there's a free kick that's actually given at the centre bounce that goes directly to you. So what happened? Did Solomon kick you? Because he got reported.
Yeah, there was a knee. They tried to knee me in the thigh, I think it was, or the back of the leg. So give me a corky, and there's I think it was that Peter Carey there. Maybe my namesake gave me a free because we have to say.
I reckon it was. Remember Hayden Kennedy? Yeah, Hayden Carey. We actually found out years later actually barracked for North Melbourne.
Yes, yeah, it was Solly, and I've got to know Solly quite well. He's a ripping fella, but they all had a bit of mongrel in them, didn't they? And and this is where it all kicks off. And look, a little bit of push and shove, and the thing about this, and I know, you know, not promoting. But all of this sort of stuff, I just think, adds to the spectacle of our game. No one got hurt. It's sort of showing.
There's a here getting in your face.
Yeah. Baz, and isn't it? And I keep saying this, but one of the nicest guys ever. He really is one of the and yet if I'd seen him outside, you know, or we ran into one another, you know, on this particular day, and then after, all of those blokes, we had a hatred for them, didn't we?
We did.
We really hated these guys. We really loved playing against them. And then, you know, you get to know them afterwards and realise they're ripping blokes. We would have loved those guys in our team, although I'm not sure they would have got a game, of course. And then actually, so you've noticed in these games that where's Mick Martin? How come he's not playing on Big Batty Lloyd? Yeah, he missed a few of these big games, didn't he?
Did he come up with a hammy because he didn't want to play on Lloyd?
Look, in Mick's defence,
you know, you get back to him, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but in Mick's defence, I would argue the likes of I'm trying to think of the fullbacks of that time. Let's say Mick Martin, Chris Langford, you know, come to mind straight away. You know, even I guess you put Jakovic, but all of these defenders during that era. I see that. I'm just giving a little bit back to Barnard there, but
it's a bit of an ear massage.
Yeah, but which was all within the rules back then, just a free kick. But you know, all of these defenders, and Mick Martin, as I said, you know, he had to play from week to week. Gary Ablett Senior, you had obviously Lockett, you had Dunstall, you had Alan Jakovic, who for a period of 50 games was as hot as anyone in the game. You had, you know, the likes of, Barry Stoneham as well. You know, obviously for Geelong, you had Stewie Lowe as well. I mean, Stephen Kernahan. He had to play on these guys week after week after week.
Yeah.
And I would argue that he beat them more than they beat him. And that's an incredible effort. I think, you know, Mick, and we like to have a bit of fun with Mick because we can, but you know, he did an unbelievable job for us. We needed a big, strong guy like him because in a lot of ways, Flossie did a great job. He was a centre-half forward, went back to centre-half back. But in a lot of ways, we were sort of lied on for, that big, strong guy that could take the big, strong forward of the opposition. And Mick did that every week for us. Arch played above his size every week.
You actually missed Barnard there. You actually didn't. Your fist went over his head.
Yeah, I think it might have been a deliberate over his head, but the elbow might have clipped the top of the head.
I just copped a little bit of a clip on the way through that gives me a lovely head bandage for the rest of the game.
Yeah, they're always a good look. The Joel Selwood look.
Robert Scott, I think he got the free kick after I went off the ground because of the blood rule.
Yeah, well, and he's another great story. Dennis Pay, Robert Scott obviously was a fantastic player at Geelong, and he was a part of my good mate leaving North and your good mate Brad Scholl. So he was involved in that trade. So Scholl went to Geelong, and we got Scotty, who, by the way, another one of those guys. As we have a look at the free kick there, definitely free kick cause, but. Scotty was another one of those guys that had a real professionalism about how he went about his training.
Yeah, he did.
He was an integral part. Him and John Blakey, who we got from other teams, were great.
I don't mean to cut you off, but you know what's coming soon. There it is.
Yep. Yeah. Look,
is that the best goal you've ever kicked?
Degree of difficulty, I think, but there's probably goals that you kick from outside 50 and from different angles and on the run and all that sort of stuff. But I guess because it's on your opposite side, it's a check side, it's a banana kick or a check side. It depends on what state you're from. Under pressure, if you have a look, Corey, if you just that vision, I do look to the top of the square. Yeah. And as you can see, there's Dustin Fletcher. And there's I think 2 or 3 other Essendon players. So there was certainly no one to kick it to. So as Dennis Pagan used to say, you live and die by the sword.
And there's that lovely bandage I've got around my head.
Yep. And I thought, I'll have a ping. I have a ping. You had a few of those bandages over your career.
No, it's just my big ears made them stand out. So it was.
You had the cauliflower ears.
Yeah. Now I think my producer, Andrew, I think we're going for about another couple of minutes. There's only one other guy I do want to show you in a passage of play, just to illustrate. He was a favourite of mine, was Abraham.
Yeah, as you can hear, little Carter crying in the background. Yeah, that's all right. Winston Abraham was an absolute gun. Absolute gun. I mean, if you talk about someone that could just glide across the ground, he was one, wasn't he, Corey? And when he got the ball in space, your eyes lit up. You just went, wow, you're going to get it lace out. He was just a great player to play with. I really loved Winnie. Really good guy too. Really good guy around the club, and fantastic. And you can see there, 2 steps.
Watch. 2 steps. Yeah. That's every bit of 55 metres there.
Yeah. No, he was you know what he was? He was a beautiful player. Beautiful player to watch. Took Mark of the Year one year in Canberra. He was just a great player.
He didn't do what you did. I think you turned some of your awards into footy trip money. I think when he kept all that. That's fair enough too. When he mightn't have been getting paid as much as me, so that's fair enough. Well, that rounds out the top 10, Ange. I know that, look, we could have had a multitude of games. I think the top 5, they all speak for themselves, and I think they are in line with the way that Duck, I think, tried to do these games. I probably understand it. And unbelievably, I think there's going to be one game that people would say, well, hang on, you kicked 11 goals. But if you're doing it in that mindset where you were saying, right, the games, with the greatest respect to the opponents, but yeah, the ones that you've picked, I think for the top 5, they all speak for themselves.
Thanks, Cause. It was, you know what, we had a very, very good team, mate, and it was a privilege to be a part of it. And, we had a lot of good times, and you don't the individual accolades of, you know, and the awards that come after footy, even or during, are all, I guess, all collective of what we did as a group. And certainly without that group, I wouldn't have been the player that I was. And without Dennis Pagan, I certainly wouldn't have been either. You know, he certainly brought the best out in me. And, you know, we were very, I think, even though I think we fell one premiership short of what we should have delivered with that group, I feel incredibly proud of the North Melbourne Footy Club and the team we had. And you know, I guess one of the things that when you do have some success, we can, I guess, do things like this and look back at those times with really fond memories.
Now, I'm conscious of time. I know that we've only got about another 7 or 8 minutes, so I'm going to scoot through a couple of questions. You mentioned North Melbourne now being named the greatest ever North Melbourne player. Out of all the accolades that you had, I remember sitting on your table. I don't think I've ever seen you so toey towards the end of the night, where the enormity of what you're about to receive is that the highest honour that you've ever had in football?
Oh, look, I think it's always, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a panel and it's their opinion.
Yeah.
And that's what they put together. I think that the top 10 at North Melbourne, you could have juggled around in different order and you wouldn't have got any arguments. So I feel honoured that they bestowed that upon me. I think the biggest compliment that night caused was when I went out the back with the other 9 guys from the stage. Yeah. Shimmer and Keith Gregg and that came up and said they were happy with me being 1 and that you could have juggled the other 9 around. And I thought, okay, well, coming from them, that made me feel pretty special. And hey,
even Blighty were happy with you being number 1.
Yeah, I'm not sure Blighty was, but yeah, look, and that's, I mean, you know, what a great footy club. We had some absolute champions, and there's some absolute champions that, you know, were not in that 10. So yeah, look, it was once again though, it's, I guess in a way it's an individual accolade. And if you notice, the majority of those 10 played in eras that were really successful for the footy club. And yeah, it's humbling. But once again, whenever these lists come up, and by the way, in isolation, hasn't there been some lists? I even did a list. But there's, you know, they're doing lists for everything at the moment. And you know what? And this is important for you to remember when these things, just because someone has an opinion on who's the best or the best, you know, it's their opinion. So it's theirs. It's right to them. And it's not even an argument. It's just an opinion. I'm flattered. I'm flattered and you know, I feel humbled by where some people say that you sit in the game. But once again, it's just either a panel or an individual's opinion, and that's all it is. Yeah.
And look, I think I'll just touch on it towards the end. I think obviously you had a few years where you went through a bit of a patch where things were a bit rocky, but how much now do you credit where you've actually, in terms of your structure and your daily routine, and just take everyone into, I know what you actually do from a week-to-week point of view, where you know, a lot of weeks the last few years you were looking after Charlotte. So how much has that actually helped in terms of now having your off-field set, that you just feel that much happier in your life and your
because I think that the hardest thing, and I don't know whether you went through the same. You always had, you know, and you went into business straight away, and you seem to have real structure, you know, in your life. And that's not to say, you know, you had everything worked out. None of us do. But I think one of the hardest things when you play professional sport and footy, and this isn't just AFL, this is world sport, is you're doing something that you love doing. Obviously, not everyone has that privilege with in terms of their work, but then coming out of it, you feel lost in a lot of ways, and you're trying to search for that thing that you loved as much as what you did before, and unfortunately, you're never going to get you're never going to go into something probably that you loved as much in terms of playing footy for a job. So, it's working that out. It's time, it's routine. When you've got, or at a footy club, and you've got to be here at a certain time, there at a certain time, and it was structure and that routine that you talked about. Then all of a sudden it's over and that's all gone. It was difficult. It was difficult for me, and I didn't think it was going to be, but it was. And I think if you spoke to everyone, I'm sure Swatter might have touched on it when you spoke to him, but I think it's a real. And I don't mean to want people to feel sorry for AFL footballers. They're privileged in ways, and but it is a real concern after they finish what they go into, and there are a lot of things that the clubs are put in place now to help them to have that to have that life after footy. But it's hard. It really is hard, and it took me a while to work out.
So is it, the first time round, was it nearly, based on what you're saying, was it nearly too easy with the deal that you had at Fox, where essentially you worked 5 hours on Saturday and then you had the rest of the week off? So that was all, not having that structure, that probably didn't help.
Well, exactly. I think, I got a job at Collingwood where I
had a desk. You never used it.
Yeah, had a computer that I didn't turn on. So and it was, and transitioned straight in, did some media. And I must admit, I didn't have a great relationship with the media. I was in denial about things, and so you're right. I had no structure. The amount of work that I did certainly didn't fulfill me mentally, and it certainly didn't fill up my week. So there were a lot of spare hours to do a lot of things that that you shouldn't have been doing. Probably, well, not probably, shouldn't have been doing. So I've found that transition. I did. I found it difficult, and I'm sure Swatter touched on this, but I've done a lot of work on myself and on that, and it took a lot of work. It wasn't just overnight. It wasn't just going to speak to someone and then saying, "Oh, okay, I'm now through this." It was years, not months, and thankfully came out the other side, and the anxiety and all these different I guess toxic feelings, embarrassment, ashamed, all of those things, and then to work through it in the right way, and then get through the other side and feel a lot better. I think I'm a way better person now than I've ever been, and part of that, unfortunately, is because of mistakes and things that I've made. Because I guess if you don't learn from them or get through them, then clearly they're yeah. But I think because of those mistakes and working through it in the right manner, I just wish I'd started working through it sooner rather than later. But thankfully got through the other end, and I feel much more comfortable in my own skin now than I ever have, and that's including footy. I feel way better about who I am now than what I ever have before, and I'm thankful for those people that helped me get through it.
And does it also help with one of the guys you're working in with the commentary box, working with the great Bruce McAvaney? Does, like, having people, you talk about surround yourself with great people, what's it like, when you're working with Bruce, working with another great friend of mine, Hamish McLaughlin, what's it like working with Bruce, for everyone out there that we don't see?
He's the most beautiful man you could ever meet. He is, talk about think of others. In an industry where it can be quite individual, obviously, and there are a lot of egos in the media, and by the way, some of them probably have the right to have egos. They've done some pretty special things in their lives, but Bruce certainly doesn't have that. And he's just, he just thinks outside himself. He wants to make you better. He helps in every way. He's just, I can't speak highly enough of that guy. And I see how and that's just not because of, it's me. I see him do it with everyone and anyone. And it's just the way he speaks to people and holds himself. I mean, he's an icon of our game, and not only our game. I think Olympics and horse racing and everything else. He's just unbelievable. And Hamish, just go back. And this is a pretty simple way, but you just mentioned. I think you are who you hang around, and that's not to blame people that I was hanging. But if you surround yourself with good people, I generally think that you're on the right track. When I say good people that are on the same vision. Not to say the people that when I did things wrong, I'm not blaming them or anything like that. I'm just saying that sometimes you certainly need to be on the same page with the people that you're hanging around, and if those people are on the same page as you, then it just makes life a lot easier and a lot happier.
I had a question from Hamish. He said, do you wear extra tight suits to show the shape you're at, even though you're 60 years old and got 3 kids?
Yeah, thanks, Hamish. I do like wearing fitted clothing. I think that's been well documented, mostly on Triple M, where you talked about our culture at North in terms of how we like to have fun. Well, I get to have that fun with my colleagues at Triple M, every Saturday as well. So yeah, look, I'm a fitted, and by the way, watching the Michael Jordan documentary, this week, Corey, Michael Jordan used to wear the floppiest suits ever. That was the trend back then. Now it's fitted. Fitted is the look, and I've probably taken it to a whole new level. Yeah.
Just on Triple M, they had a bit of feedback about the new feathers on the top. But what's been the resurgence?
Have you noticed?
Well, we did say that it was like Homer in The Simpsons when Homer grew his hair back.
You should get a photo. I've been going to the hairdressers for the last probably 15, 20 years, Corey, and good friend of ours, Kate Allen, has been cutting my hair, who and other hairdressers along the way when she's been away, and they keep cutting a hole in the top. And I've said, no, I was receding. So no, it's actually, in all seriousness, and I never had a relationship with this company, and I do now. 2 young guys started a company called Mosh.
Yeah.
And it's not just about growing your own hair back. So this isn't a possum. It's no possum.
It's not a raccoon.
It's not a raccoon. It's not sewing in hair. It's my natural hair growing back. And they've got this product, but they've also got products around men's health. Yeah. They've also got products around. So this is 2 young men that started this company that have done amazing things. And the only reason why I now have a relationship is because, like a few of my mates that started it, I started using it, and my hair started growing back, and I went, wow. So I made contact with them, and now I'm more than happy to say this actually grows your hair back and works. And like I said, their whole product range is about men's health, both inside and outside. So, very fine young men, and I'm very happy to be associated with them now. And, the confidence is that I no longer when people walk behind me, do I have to stand up so that I don't see the hole in the back of my head. It's actually filled in.
Very funny. Yeah, I'm sure the Triple M boys would have been really sympathetic about that. So,
yeah, no, fair to say I poke fun. I'm happy to talk about my hair. Some others don't like talking about possums.
No, there's if it grows naturally, I reckon that's all right. I think it's exactly. When you get your that's.
I agree.
Well, look, I'm conscious of the time. I know that you've got another call. You've been extremely generous with your time. on a personal note, I know I did say this to you. I wouldn't have become the player I would have become if I didn't have someone like you in terms of the way that you prepared and went about your footy. So the effect that you had on us and all the North Melbourne teammates, and I think David King even hit it on the head, that maybe the biggest compliment you can say is the way that you treated others, and having, like we mentioned, Dean Collins out there and all of our friends, people coming in, that you actually did treat everyone the same. So it's probably the biggest compliment outside of the footy stuff that I can pay you. And I think, everyone's proud of you that you're back on track and you're happy. And let's hope that we're going to see a hell of a lot more Kangaroos wins coming up in, hopefully, whatever happens in 2021.
Thanks, Cause. And you've always been a support of mine through good and bad. So I appreciate that. You're making me blush now. I feel like I feel embarrassed, but they're kind words. Appreciate it, and good luck with all of this, because it's been fun. It's been just nice to look back on some of the really nice memories that we've shared together. So appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem, mate.
Cheers.